Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jake Wynn with the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. Hope you're all doing well today. This is another one of our live programs that we are going to be hosting. Very, very excited about having you all here today with us. I am joined today by my friend, Tim Talbott from Pamplin Park. He's going to be our speaker today. Very excited to have Tim on. We're going to be talking about the Battle of Newmarket Heights and medical care for United States colored troops at that battle. So if you are here and joining us today, you can help us in a number of different ways. You can support these videos by going ahead and hitting that like button, hit that share button, share with your audience as well. And then you can also take your support to the next level and become a member of the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. That allows you to support these videos, support these programs. We know over the years, or over the last year, I should say, we've had lots of great supporters become members of the museum. You are directly supporting programs like this. So if you haven't yet done it, please consider becoming a member. Starts at $25 a year and does go directly to support programs like this one. So you can help us, help the National Museum of Civil War Medicine by becoming a member. You get lots of great perks as well. And thank you to those of you who might be out there watching who already have become a member of the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. So I'm joined today, like I mentioned, by Tim Talbott from Pamplin Park. He is with us today. How are you doing today, Tim?
Doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Excellent. So glad to have you here. I've been looking forward to this presentation for quite some time now, and glad to actually have you here. So as mentioned in the kickoff, we are going to be talking about the Battle of Newmarket Heights today. And we're going to be talking about medical care there in regards to the United States colored troops. Of course, it is Black History Month, and we have been focusing on the medical stories related to African-American service in the Civil War throughout the month on our Facebook page, social media, Instagram, YouTube as well. Good place to mention that this video will exist on our Facebook page and YouTube for the foreseeable future, so you can find this program in a variety of places. But Tim, can you share with our audience a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got interested in these stories?
Sure. I'm the Director of Education and Interpretation, Visitor Services and Collections here at Pamplin Historical Park. And this is actually my, I guess, like to call it, my second tour of duty working here. My first experience out of graduate school, first employer was here at Pamplin. I worked from 2006 to 2009. And during that time period, we did a temporary exhibit about the United States colored troops. And that was my first really time of learning about Newmarket Heights. And then after 2009, I went to the Kentucky Historical Society. And while I was there, I really got to learn about a different aspect of United States colored troops and the border state, which has really been fascinating. And then when I came back to Pamplin in 2015, got to do a little bit more research, and being back here in the Richmond and Petersburg area, actually getting out on the ground. And in 2017, I led one of our symposium tours out to Newmarket Heights and shared the ground and some of the stories with the soldiers out there. And it was doing that sort of in-depth research that really got me hooked on this story and made me want to really create some awareness about this battle that so many people have not even heard of before. And a lot of people have misconceptions about. When people hear Newmarket Heights, they often think about the battle that happened out in the Shenandoah Valley in May of 1864 that involved the Virginia Military Institute cadets. But this Newmarket Heights, this Newmarket is different and involves that very important USCT story.
Yeah, and I know that, Tim, you've been participating and doing a great job of sharing these stories on Facebook as well with the Newmarket Heights Remembrance Facebook page. I'll share a link to that page into the comments section here in just a bit. So if you want to know more about this battle and to see more of these stories, there's a great place on Facebook to actually go and see that. And Tim's doing a great job of sharing these stories. So let's dive in, Tim. If you're ready to go, we'll get our share screen up here, and we'll pick up the formal part of the presentation. I'll have it up here in just a second. All right, there we go. So Tim, take it away.
Sure. So most of the viewers are probably familiar with the Petersburg Campaign and its attempt to capture Petersburg and Richmond starting in June of 1864. But 3 months into the Petersburg Campaign, General Grant, in charge of the Union Army of the Potomac, along with General Meade, have made some serious and important advances in what they're trying to do. It's probably maybe taking a little bit longer than they wish, but they're doing some important things. They're cutting railroads, they're cutting wagon roads. They're making it harder for the Confederates to supply themselves and to shuttle troops. So here in September of 1864, Grant wants to improve upon the successes he's made and correct some errors that he has made as well. Now, since what's known as the Third Offensive, more popularly known as the Battle of the Crater, in July, the end of July 1864, Grant has been combining efforts both at Petersburg as well as north of the James River to threaten Richmond. What he's trying to do with those double movements is to draw troops away from Petersburg, Lee's troops away from Petersburg, so he can make significant inroads here at Petersburg. And this is going to be the third time that he does that. As I mentioned, that third offensive at the end of July with fighting here at Petersburg at the Crater. There's also fighting up north of the James, known as First Deep Bottom. Then the second attempt is going to be in mid-August with fighting again at Deep Bottom. And the success that the Fifth Corps is going to have in capturing the Weldon Railroad here at Petersburg. So this is going to be late September that he's going to make another one of these moves. And this is going to be combined with the successes that General Sheridan has been having over in the Shenandoah Valley. Who's making all these movements, of course? Grant is setting the grand strategy, but General Benjamin Butler, who's in charge of the Army of the James, operating on the Bermuda Hundred Peninsula, as well as north of the James River, he is making those sort of tactical moves and strategic moves up there with Grant's approval. When Grant learns about those victories at 3rd Winchester and at Fisher's Hill in September, he wants to make sure that Lee doesn't send more troops out to Jubal early in the valley. So he orders another one of these offensives, and Butler is going to be leading the offensive north of the James on September 29th, 1864. Involved in that is going to be a two-pronged offensive. They're going to cross the James River, and the 18th Corps, at least two divisions of the 18th Corps, are going to attack a position known as Fort Harrison, a Confederate position. Then the 10th Corps, along with the 3rd Division of the 18th Corps, which is an all-black division, is going to make movements to the north and attack at Newmarket Heights, where the Confederate has a defensive line. Now, General Hancock and the 2nd Corps had tried to capture Newmarket Heights in those 1st and 2nd Deep Bottom offensives earlier in the summer, but had not been successful. He'd always attacked from the east to the west, and Butler's going to try to attack more from the west and move north. Butler's strategy on this, of course, you can go to the next slide for me, Jake, is to cross over this pontoon bridge with those United States colored troops of the 3rd Division, 18th Corps. This bridgehead that they have here has been in place since the summer. They have defenses out around it, and there are some USCT troops that are stationed there at Deep Bottom, serving as pickets, trying to get information. And they're going to be crossing, most of them who are not already there, on the night of the 28th into the morning of the 29th of September. And you can go to the next one, next slide. So those troops that are going to be making the movement are going to be coming from the James River, which you can see at the bottom of this map, and moving forward. There's going to be two primary attacks made, and there's two divisions, actually 3 brigades in the 3rd Division. The first attack is going to be led by the 4th USCT. I'll actually refer to it as the USCI, so it doesn't get confusing, infantry, and the 6th USCI. And they are going to kick off that attack about 6:30 or so in the morning. And they're going to move forward. Now, the Confederates have an advantage here. On their defensive line, they're fighting behind earthworks, and behind them is a signal station on Newmarket Heights that you can see on the map there. Now, these aren't just any Confederate troops that these United States colored troops are going to be fighting against. These are Texans, the Texas Brigade. They had won their fame, of course, in the 7 days at Antietam, at Gettysburg. They're very tried and true Confederate fighters. Probably Lee's most dependable throughout the war brigade that he has in the Army of Northern Virginia. So the commander of the 3rd Division is Charles Payne, and his strategy for making this attack is not all that sound. He's going to send in that 1st Brigade under Samuel Duncan, the 4th and the 6th, and they're going to try to make an attack. What they're going to run into is a lot of marshy, boggy ground, as well as at least 2 rows of abatis that the Confederates have set up to try to slow them down. And they're going to take horrific casualties. The 4th and the 6th are going to end up taking about 700 men total into this fight, and they're going to lose about 350 as far as killed, wounded, and captured in this first attack. They're going to fall back after they try to make their attack. They're not successful in breaking through. The next group up is going to be Colonel Alonso Draper's brigade, and that consists of the 5th, the 36th, and the 38th United States Colored Infantries. And they're going to attack not so much in formation, but in stacked columns of regiments. And that's going to end up being about an hour after the 4th and the 6th had attacked. And they are going to run into that same abattis, although they're going to use to their advantage some of the holes that the 4th and the 6th had made to get close, but they're going to bog down as well due to heavy firing from those Texans, as well as artillery fire on either flank, as you can see from the map there. So you can go on to the next slide. This slide is showing that first attack, and these are men represented here from the 6th United States Colored Infantry. Holding the flag in the center, the regimental flag, is Lieutenant Nathan Edgerton. He's going to be wounded in the left hand. On the right, carrying the United States standard, is Sergeant Alexander Kelly from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then adjusting the regimental banner is Thomas Hawkins from Cincinnati, Ohio originally. But Hawkins is going to receive some serious wounds in this fight. And you can see sort of what they're running into with these cut trees, this slashing, really sort of running into these obstacles is slowing down the momentum of this attack. You can go on to the next slide. This is showing that second attack led by the 5th, the 36th, and the 38th, hitting right about the same spot that the 4th and the 6th attacked. They're covering pretty much the same ground. What is kind of a shame here is that the 10th Corps is off to the west, and they really just sort of demonstrate their, don't really move into action until late in this fight. So what the Confederates are able to do is, although it looks like they're spread out across this defensive line, they're able to get information from that signal station behind them to tell them that these USCTs are attacking on a narrow front, and they're able to actually pack their men into that point of attack and inflict maximum casualties on these United States colored troops. Well, after being bogged down for maybe a half an hour, and a lot of these white officers leading these United States colored troops received terrible wounds. A lot of the NCOs, the corporals, the sergeants, they're going to sort of take over and again, get the momentum rolling again and move forward. And you can go onto that third map. And they're actually finally going to be able to pierce through right about where the 4th Texas and the 1st Texas are showing flank to flank. Then combined with that, General Payne is going to throw in John Holman's brigade to their left, which consists of the 22nd, the 1st, and the 37th. And then also some of that 10th Corps, the 6th Connecticut, 7th Connecticut, 3rd New Hampshire, and 24th Massachusetts are also going to advance. And they're going to push those Texans totally out of that position, and they're going to retreat away. That second attack, led by the 5th, the 36th, and the 38th, they're going to take in about 1,300 men, having 3 regiments. And they're going to lose about 450 men, either killed, wounded, or captured, which is about a third of their troops are going to be receiving casualties. So the 1st Brigade, again, about 50% casualties. The 2nd Brigade that attacks, about a third, 33% or 34, 35% casualties. So they're taking significant hits and they're receiving some terrible, terrible wounds, as you might imagine. Once the Federals pursue the Confederates out of this position, the men are going to start receiving treatment and they're going to be transported, as far as I can tell, mainly by ambulance, back to the James River, to that deep bottom bridgehead they have. And they're going to be placed upon hospital steamers. You can go to the next slide. So this is the Thomas Powell. This is one of about 5 or 6 of those hospital steamers that are going to be picking up these wounded soldiers. And then some of them are going to be carried to the 18th Corps Hospital at Point of Rocks, which is on the Appomattox River, not too far from City Point. But the vast majority of them are going to be sent down to Fort Monroe, further down the James, and then across Hampton Roads. Some of them are going to be taken as well to Portsmouth, Virginia, and a hospital there called Balfour General Hospital. So those 2 hospitals are also going to be receiving lots and lots of these wounded soldiers. One of the saddest accounts that I found doing the research was a soldier, Private Thomas Anderson, who was in Company E of the 6th United States Colored Infantry. I found in his service records, it said, quote, wounded in action, September 29th, 1864, and jumped overboard while being conveyed from Point of Rocks Hospital to the U.S. General Hospital in Hampton, Virginia, by the steamer Thomas Powell on October 3rd, 1864. His wound produced insanity, which caused the act. So apparently that head wound had affected him mentally, and he committed suicide by jumping off the side of this boat that you see in this picture, the Thomas Powell. Another soldier, you can go to the next slide, is Corporal Risden Newman of the 4th USCI. And he is actually going to, as you can read there, pass away. He's going to actually die while being in transport on the boat on September 29th. And then the next slide. This one is Henry Jackson. And he's also going to be one of those casualties in the attack, transported by boat. And he is going to receive an amputation of not only his left arm, but his left thigh. Some of these wounds that are mentioned in these service records are quite amazing. And again, this is not to sensationalize the pain that these men went through. It is just to show you the courage and the sacrifice that they put up to try to achieve this victory at Newmarket Heights. And I'm gonna just read through some of these wound descriptions. Gunshot wound to the right lung, gunshot wound to the abdomen, amputation of left thigh, gunshot wound to the back, injuring the spine, exsection of left elbow due to gunshot wound, gunshot wound of left shoulder, gunshot wound to left knee joint, resulting in amputation, death coming from second hemorrhage, meaning that he had had his leg amputated, fixed, and then it broke an artery apparently again. Gunshot wound to the right forearm with fracture of the radius, amputation of the right leg, gunshot wound to the left leg and scrotum, gunshot wound causing loss of lower third of jaw, gunshot wound to left shoulder fracturing humerus, gunshot wound to both thighs, paralysis of left arm, injury from brachial nerve by gunshot wound to the neck, right arm amputation at shoulder joint. So these men went through a tremendous amount of suffering, as happened in all Civil War battles. But of course, the stigma upon Black soldiers at this time is they would not show the courage necessary to receive wounds like this. But this is going to totally dismantle those myths that people had about Black soldiers when word about this gets out. I found an article in the New York Herald newspaper which told about the preparations that were being made at Fort Monroe to try to treat these soldiers. And it appeared on October 2nd, just a couple of days after the battle. And it says, quote, preparations to receive the wounded have been made by Acting Medical Director Dr. Ely McClellan, United States Army, on the most extensive scale. The different wards of this hospital have been cleared in anticipation of this campaign. And as the wounded arrive, they are taken from the boats by light draft steamers and at once provided for in the hospital. Several large hospital transports are waiting in Hampton Roads to carry those able to be transported north. So not only are some of these soldiers going to be treated at Point of Rocks Hospital, some of them are going to be treated, as I mentioned, at Hampton and Fort Monroe, and some of them at Balfour Hospital in Portsmouth, Virginia. But also I've found accounts of them being shipped up to Summit House Hospital in Philadelphia and Portsmouth Grove Hospital in Rhode Island, and even some hospitals in New York City. So these men are either taxing these local hospitals to their max, or they're needing additional attention and being sent to these other facilities for treatment. So the Army is going to extensive measures to try to take care of these soldiers as quickly as they can. It appears from the records that I'm finding. So much of this information that I'm finding are being located in the soldiers' compiled military service records. And if you've ever looked through those, it can be a very tedious process. Picking through those, sometimes they're not in order. Sometimes you have to piece together the information. But what is really cool about researching these service records is it does show the diversity amongst the United States colored troops. When we think about the USCTs, we kind of always think of a monolithic group, young men formerly enslaved, fighting to end slavery. But really these point out that these men, just like other white Civil War soldiers, are very diverse in their age. You got guys as young as 17, you got guys I found as old as 47 fighting in these units. Not all of them are formerly enslaved. A good number of these soldiers, especially those from the 6th USCI, the 5th, which are Pennsylvania and Ohio regiments, the 4th, which is from Baltimore, a lot of those gentlemen have been free their whole lives. And they've got additional things that they're fighting for in addition to freeing slaves. They're trying to show their manhood, their ability to be citizens and receive the benefits of what has always been unfulfilled constitutional guarantees. They also have a wide range of occupations. Some of them volunteer, some of them are drafted, some of them are serving as substitutes. In these service records, you see promotions from private to corporal, to sergeant, to first sergeant, sometimes to sergeant majors. And some of them have records as well on court martials. Of course, one of the things that Newmarket Heights is known for are the amount of Medal of Honor recipients from that fight. I've sort of outpaced my slides, Jake. I'm sorry. You can go to the next slide. This is actually going to show the Point of Rocks Hospital. It's hard to see in the very far background, but there's a number of different wards there at the hospital. And from what I'm able to find out, most of these wards were segregated by race. So that is still something that is being dealt with, of course. The next slide. One of the soldiers in the 4th United States Colored Infantry that's wounded in this fight, you can see here in the center of the photograph is Lieutenant James Murray Hogue. He actually was wounded in the the right shoulder and then the left arm. And as you can see, he lost his left arm in the fight. Next to him, with the Sergeant Major stripes, you can see one of the most famous Medal of Honor recipients, Sergeant Major Christian Fleetwood. And you can see wearing his Medal of Honor as well as his Butler Medal there on his chest. Very proud of those. And you can flip on to the next slide. Here's the Butler Medal, not as famous, of course, as the Medal of Honor, but this was going to be personally commissioned and struck by General Butler himself. And there's going to be 197 of these, as far as I can tell, given out to men who deserved special acclaim for their participation in the Battle of Newmarket Heights. A number of the men who won the Medal of Honor or received the Medal of Honor also receive a Butler Medal. And then the last slide. One of those Medal of Honor recipients is Sergeant Major Thomas Hawkins of the 6th. He was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. He apparently had served with a white regiment as a camp servant earlier in the war, but when black soldiers were finally allowed to enlist in large numbers, he's going to join the 6th and eventually become the Sergeant Major. So him and Christian Fleetwood of the 4th, they're often brigaded together, became good friends. During the fight at Newmarket Heights, Thomas Hawkins here is going to receive a wound to his foot, to his hip, and to his arm. And he's not going to be able to return to service again. He's going to muster out. And unfortunately, in 1870, he is going to die an early death, I believe from tuberculosis. And again, it goes to show you how people's service affected the rest of their lives. But one other soldier that I'd like to mention who doesn't get enough publicity, who received the Medal of Honor, is Corporal Miles James of the 36th. During the fight, Miles James received a terrible wound in his left arm, and his commission, his citation for his Medal of Honor actually mentions that he went ahead and was able to load and fire with a shattered left arm and continue to encourage his comrades to go forward. And in his service record search, I found a fascinating letter by Colonel Draper, who was commanding his brigade. And he's writing to the surgeon in charge of the hospital at Fort Monroe. And he says, "Sir, quote, Sergeant Miles James, Company B, 36th United States Colored Infantry, writes me from your hospital to urge that he may be permitted to remain in service. He lost his left arm in the charge upon Newmarket Heights on September 29th, 1864. If it be possible, I would most respectfully urge that his request be granted. He was made a sergeant and awarded a silver medal by General Butler for gallant conduct. He's one of the bravest men I've ever saw and is in every respect a model soldier. He is worth more with his single arm than half a dozen ordinary men. Being a sergeant, he will be very little occasion as a file closer and no need to use a musket. He could be Sergeant Major of my Provost Guard or Headquarters Guard and could do full duty in many ways. If consistent with your views of duty, I shall be greatly obliged if you can make it convenient to return him to his regiment." And he is able to come back and serve with his regiment and receives a sword to use instead of a musket now that he has one arm, and musters out in Texas. So it goes to show you the quality of these men that were receiving these these casualties at the Battle of Newmarket Heights.
That is fantastic, Tim. And that story there is pretty powerful. Actually, it's going to kind of blend into a comment and a question that we have here. I do want to give a shout out to some of our commenters. Thank you all for tuning in. We have about 100 people watching live now. Thank you all so much for being here and supporting us today. People tuning in from all over the country. I want to give a shout out to DC Overby, who's been dropping some great knowledge in the comments section about the United States colored troops and African-American soldiers and sailors. Important to mention them in here as well and their contributions to the Civil War. But we have a question here from Nancy, who's watching in White Plains, New York. And this is a question that we oftentimes receive as we receive research requests at the Museum of Civil War Medicine, and that is, you have some great pieces of evidence here, and Nancy wants to know. She asked about how many of these are public records. So I want to go a little bit further than that, and I know you mentioned the kind of service records for these soldiers, but where are some of the other places that you are collecting this evidence, this research, these primary sources?
Well, the vast majority of what I'm finding is in those compiled military service records through the National Archives and are available on fold3.com. That's where I'm finding the vast majority of these descriptions of injuries. When soldiers are discharged, either due to inability to serve, it lists in there often what their injury was. Pretty specific in some cases. So most of that information is coming from there. Also some stuff from pension records. Some of those are also available on Fold 3 from Civil War soldiers' widows who are seeking pensions. So those regimental records are there as well by soldier, broken up into different companies of each USCT regiment. So those pension records are available as well. And another great source are African-American newspapers. These soldiers were often writing from the front back to those newspapers like the Christian Recorder, the Afro-American, the African Anglo newspaper. I might have that title wrong. And another one was the Pine and Palm newspaper. And they write back and explain what they're seeing, and they're printing these soldiers' letters in the newspapers as well. So those are the three probably main sources that I'm using to get most of the information that I've found so far.
Yeah, a great point there, Tim, about the newspapers. This is a conversation that we had last week with Kelly Mazurek, talking about some of the sources for her research, for her book on the 27th United States Colored Troops, and also for upcoming projects, is that a lot has been made about kind of illiteracy amongst African-American units, and that there's not as much of the primary source material. And what you find when you start to see these things, as you've seen, Tim, is that isn't necessarily always the case, that they're oftentimes writing their own experiences in their own words.
Yeah, especially these free men from the North who have received an education. Some of them are receiving an education upon their enlistment in the service too, what spare time they have. So to categorize the United States colored troops as largely illiterate is probably not fair at all.
Another question here, and this is going to go back to, you made some great comments about kind of the evacuation of the wounded from the battlefield, and the mention of ambulances and then the hospital steamers and ultimately on to general hospitals. I have a question here from Lynn Bristol, who's a great supporter of the museum, always has great questions, likes to stump us. And this is a question that I want to give you a shot at. I might have some ideas as well, but have you encountered in your research anything about any African-American physicians or ambulance drivers associated with this battle?
Yes. So some of the service records that you run through will show soldiers who are on detached service from the regiment, and they're either detached to something like the Pioneers, or the 3rd Division of the 18th Corps had a sharpshooters unit. So some of the soldiers are detailed to that sharpshooters unit. And some of them are detailed to Provo Guard, and some of them are detached to ambulance drivers as well, and cooks. Some of them are doing those different things, but I did see a few that were detached as ambulance drivers.
Excellent. There was a great there's a great blog post. I think my colleague Kyle Dalton is watching the video. There's a great blog post on our website, civilwarmed.org, that kind of goes into this topic about Black ambulance drivers, stretcher bearers, and their experience during the Civil War. That is not an enviable position to have, to be essentially, as I saw mentioned, this is a white hospital steward in 1862 writes, it's to be a battlefield combatant, non-combatant, to have a role that is not related to shooting or fighting the enemy, but instead of picking up the casualties from who have fallen at the front line.
Yeah, and it may be a time before they're able to get onto the field to retrieve these soldiers. Sometimes they may be doing it during the battle. But when I found Thomas Hawkins' information, Christian Fleetwood had written in support of his Hawkins' wife receiving a pension. And he mentioned in there that Thomas Hawkins had laid on the field for 3 hours before he was found and evacuated off the field. So it's very dangerous work for those guys.
I have a question that has actually messaged us. I just saw it come through. This comes from George Fickett. He says, "Hi, Tim," and asks, "Do you know where I can find a map of the hospital layout at Point of Rocks, Virginia?"
I do not. I actually have to give George a shout out. He gave me some information about Point of Rocks to try to help fill in some holes. And I was able to get through some of it, but he gave me so much stuff, I wasn't able to get through it all. And I haven't found a map that shows the hospital wards there at Point of Rocks, but I'm looking forward to learning more about that, especially the nurses aspect of it. Clara Barton was famously at Point of Rocks, and is, from what I understand, she ministered to some of these Black soldiers. One of the accounts that I found related to the females' roles in this battle was somebody I'd never heard of before, but her name was Lydia Penny, and she was the wife of Private Thomas Penny, who was in the 5th USCI, and another soldier that was in the 27th wrote about her, and in fact, what she did that day. And I'll just read this real quick because I think it's important that the females also get a shout out here. Sister Penny says that she is not tired of the service, nor does she think of leaving the field until the last gun is fired and peace declared and every slave is freed from captivity. Many of our officers and men who were wounded at the Battle of Deep Bottom, meaning the Battle of Newmarket Heights, will never forget the kind deeds Sister Lydia Penny, who went among them and administered to their wants as they lay weltering in their blood on the banks of the James River near Jones Landing. There she could be seen, the only woman present, like an angel from above, giving words of cheer and doing all in her power to relieve the suffering of the wounded and dying. So sorry to diverge off question there, but it's a great sort of segue to talk about Sister Lydia Penny and her efforts to try to comfort these wounded soldiers. But yeah, if anybody finds a map of Point of Rocks, please share it with me, and I'll share it with George.
Excellent. I want to, that's a great parallel then, and you did bring up Clara Barton, who was working with some of these soldiers, which is a story that's near and dear to my heart, as I work at the Missing Soldiers Office Museum here in Washington, D.C., where Barton lived and worked during the Civil War era, and kind of not a forgotten element of Barton's wartime experience, but definitely it gets less play than the Antietam story, where she earns the nickname Angel of the Battlefield. But her role with Black communities in South Carolina in 1863 was incredibly important to Barton's kind of evolution into an abolitionist and someone who is very vehemently anti-slavery after having experienced it up close and personal. We have a great blog post on our website as well written by Chandra Manning, Georgetown University, exploring Barton's role in dealing with a smallpox epidemic in South Carolina in 1863. And she's going to continue this work with with Black soldiers in 1864 and her role as helping to manage the hospital there at Point of Rocks. As one of the kind of overseeing some of the nurses who worked in that hospital. Barton going from no worse nursing experience at the beginning of the Civil War, no training, to helping to manage and deal with all of these casualties, with some of these horrific wounds that you mentioned there, Tim. Going down that list, I just find myself getting kind of nauseous, especially in that very powerful way that you did that you kind of just listing them off of, you know, that's only a fraction of the casualties that are being seen in these hospitals.
Yeah, it's horrific. The Battle of Newmarket Heights Memorial and Education Association that you mentioned earlier, we're working to get a monument placed there at the battle site at Newmarket Heights. And in addition to that effort, we're also trying to educate the public about the service of these men. So we have a website at battleofnewmarketheights.org. And we're trying to tell these soldiers' stories. And I've been compiling each regiment's casualty lists and placing them on the website as well. So if people are interested in learning more and paying your respects to these men who were both killed and wounded and captured, please check out our website, battleofnewmarketheights.org. And if you see fit to become a member or participate in some way, get in touch with me. We want all the help we can get in getting this word out.
So we have a number of comments here related to Benjamin Butler. And I'd be curious to kind of explore this question that kind of came into my mind. And we think of Ben Butler, not necessarily a man known for his military acumen, but someone who, in regards to African Americans in the Civil War, is kind of crucial. DC Overby mentioned in the comments here about the term contraband, and Butler plays a crucial role in kind of the evolution of African American freedom during the Civil War as a result of decisions he makes in 1861 at Fortress Monroe. I'm curious for your insights on this, Tim. How does Butler do does he work to kind of commemorate these soldiers who are fighting in these battles, kind of with the Army of the James? Does he talk about this during the war or afterwards, that kind of shares the legacy of these men?
Yeah, in his very detailed battle plan for Newmarket Heights and Fort Harrison, it's actually 16 pages long. And Grant okays the plan. But in that, he basically signals out the 3rd Division of the 18th Corps to be the ones that make that attack, because he is trying to show these white soldiers that are surrounding them that these guys can fight, and you shouldn't be afraid if you ever find yourself on their flank or serving with them. So he intentionally lays out the battle plan for basically them to make the effort at Newmarket Heights. And of course, with the Butler Medal, he's wanting to recognize those soldiers who did particularly heroic deeds during the battle. I believe he didn't think that 14 medals of honor were enough for those men and what they went through. So he was giving out additional medals to recognize them there at the battle. And like you said, I think you used a perfect word. Butler really evolves from the beginning of the war to the end, and then even into his time during Reconstruction in Congress, and trying to pass certain things like the Civil Rights Act of 1875 and things like that. He has these guys constantly in the back of his mind to try to push forward things that give them equality and citizenship and the true benefits of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments.
I want to give a shout out to Richard Houston in the comments section. He mentioned that he uses and shared a link, thank you for this, Richard, to a tribute that Butler gave during a debate in Congress on the Civil Rights Act about these soldiers. And there's a link there, so if you want to read more about that in the Civil Rights Act, that is in the comments, thanks to Richard. So big shout out to you, Richard, for that. I want to take a kind of step step back, we've seen this kind of from the perspective of some of these USCT soldiers, they're white officers in Butler. I'm curious, especially considering this battle takes place, 2 months after the battle at the crater, infamously. I'm curious if there are any accounts of the Confederate soldiers in this fight, and what they say about these soldiers that they're facing off with.
Yeah, so that's interesting. There are accounts. Some of them are period accounts. Some of them are memoir accounts. So you kind of have to take a little bit of grain of salt with some of them. But some of them are congratulatory. Some of them take a very prejudiced stance, as you might imagine. One of them that I really found interesting was this gentleman, his name was J.D. Pickens, and he says, quote, "As anticipated, just at the break of day, the enemy charged us in a solid line of battle. In fact, I think there were 2 or 3 lines, all Negro troops. I want to say in this connection that in my opinion, no other troops up to that time had fought us with more bravery than did those Negroes." So he's kind of giving them, the benefit and saying that they fought very well. Now, some other accounts, they're saying that the black troops that attacked at Newmarket Heights were being driven forward at the point of bayonet by white troops behind them, and there's no evidence of that whatsoever. Now, what's really interesting is to see a difference in perspective. Now, the first 2 attacking regiments, the 4th and the 6th, have been ordered to load their guns, to fix their bayonets, and to push these Confederate soldiers out at the point of the bayonet, but not to stop and fire. They don't want them to break their formations and slow things up and have to reload and things like that. So they're not supposed to cap their gun. They're supposed to push forward, and they were following orders. They took horrendous casualties without firing back because that was what they were ordered to do. Well, the Texans, they said that it appeared as if they didn't know how to use their guns. They weren't stopping to shoot back at us. So from their perspective, they were seeing these black soldiers as being incompetent because they don't know how to work their guns. It's not that they don't know how to work their guns, it's that they've been ordered to charge in there and use the bayonet. So that was interesting to see that difference in perspective. But after the first 2 regiments are rebuffed, they come back, they retreat. There's a lot of wounded soldiers out there. Those Texans, they come over their earthworks. There are some accounts of atrocities happening like at the crater. They are taking uniform parts. They're taking equipment off these soldiers. They're taking money out of their pockets. They're taking all the guns that are laying on the ground back into the earthworks with them. And one soldier said that he had 7 guns loaded and ready for the next attack of the 5th, the 36th, and the 38th. So it shows you how prepared they were making themselves in between those attacks.
Another question here. We have kind of 2 quick hit ones. One from Beth. What is the highest rank of colored troops that you've encountered in this engagement? Do you have an idea of who the highest ranking African-American soldier in this battle would be?
At the time of the battle would have been a sergeant major. I'm not aware of any African-American lieutenants. Now, there were in other regiments that served in other parts during the war, especially late in 1865. But in this battle, as far as I know, the highest rank would be those sergeant majors of each of those regiments.
Great. And then we have another question from Chris, who's another longtime viewer of our programs. Hi, Chris. Were there any African-American artillerists at this battle?
No. So as far as I'm aware, there's not any artillery being fought in this battle from the U.S. side. Now, the Confederates do have artillery on each of their flanks of the Texas Brigade. But as far as I'm aware, there's no USCT artillery being fought at this battle.
All right, great. Now we have Kevin Chapman jumped in with a question here and comment. He says, lots of historians try to point this USCT victory out as being the result of other battlefield developments causing the rebels to retreat. Basically saying that although the rebels left the works, it was not due to the efforts and blood of the USCTs. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, that is often a common interpretation. I think that was advanced by the Texans themselves, and historians kind of picked that up. But from what I've seen, even the casualties from the 38th, which is the last main unit to attack, along with Holman's brigade off to their left, the 22nd, the 1st, and the 37th, those units that are attacking late in this battle are also still receiving tremendous amount of casualties. So to say that those guys are abandoning the position and heading off to Fort Harrison to try to buoy up those works, I think is probably a little bit short-sighted and looking back with a bit of a prejudiced eye. The accounts that I'm reading, and some of those accounts are both from the Confederate side as well as the Union side, they're getting pushed out of that position. It's not a recall to leave the field from my accounts that I've found.
Excellent. That was a great
total USCT victory, in my opinion.
Excellent. A great question, Kevin. Thank you. Thank you for the comment and the question, driving some interesting thoughts there to talk a little bit about the memory of these battles. And we've talked a bit about that as well, just how our memory, the historical memory of these battles, of the service of certain units can evolve over time. History is not necessarily fixed, and our understanding can definitely change over the decades or over a century and a half. So we have a couple of other questions here. Keep them coming. If you have we have a few more minutes here to address some of these questions. Some of them that I've seen kind of recurring through here are more logistical related. This video will be up on the National Museum of Civil War Medicine Facebook page for good now. You can go back and watch the beginning of the stream. You can also go over to YouTube. This video will appear on the museum's YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/NMCWM. We'll put that link into the comments as well. Subscribe while you're over there. We have lots of great video content that we're sharing over there. And then we have, going back to, I believe, 2012, we have videos over there. So lots of good stuff to check out over there. You can find all of these videos that we record live end up over on the YouTube channel as well. Another question that we have here, I believe I saw two of these related to research. And with the museum related to wounded soldiers. If you do have a question related, if you're doing research on an ancestor, you're looking for information specifically about where a soldier was wounded, where they may have been treated, we do have a research department at the National Museum of Civil War Medicine in Frederick. There is a question section of our website. Ask a question, and you will get a form there that will directly link you to our research department. It's been great. We've been very busy with research requests, which is awesome. So folks sending things in, questions that you may have, but that is a great way to get directly in touch with us. If you do have a question, we do encourage you to, if you do research with us, to donate to the museum. Become a member, support these research efforts, support these this work to kind of fully tell the story of Civil War medicine and help us, help you to learn more about your ancestor, any unit you might be particularly interested in, to find out more about their story, their medical service, their medical history. See here. Take a look. So we have a question that came up that I would like to address. It comes up anytime I think we talk about African-American soldiers in the Civil War, and that is related to Black Confederates. And we have a question here, and that comes from SP Brown saying, were there any colored men that fought on the Confederate side during the Battle of Newmarket Heights? And this is a loaded question that we could probably spend another hour discussing, but I want to give you first shot at that, Tim, but feel free to throw it back throw it back to me if need be.
I've not come across any evidence of any Black soldiers fighting for the Texas Brigade or those supporting units of artillery as well as dismounted cavalry on the left of the line. There is an account of a Confederate memoir account by a soldier by the last name of Polly. I think it's Thomas Polly was his name. And he mentioned that on September 29th, and again, this could be fighting later in the day at Fort Gilmer, where they fall back to after they get pushed out of this position. The Texans fight at Fort Gilmer against some different USCTs later in the day. He said that there was a captured soldier or two that served him the rest of the war as a camp servant that was captured there on September 29th. It doesn't give a name, but that's the only connection that I can find with African Americans and the Texans.
Yeah, I want to add in, I actually just saw this being shared by Appomattox, the National Park Unit at Appomattox, sharing some quotes from Jefferson Davis from February of 1865 in reference to the attempt by the Confederate government at organizing some regiments of African American troops, of enslaved people. And they were discussing it and ultimately decided not to. So that is very telling for us when talking about Confederate African Americans in the service of the Confederate Army, that this is, if it happens and African American soldiers are participating and actively fighting on the Confederate side, that is a exception. It is exceptional. It is not the norm at all. Now, that is not to say that the Confederate Army, as in many films and movies, is portrayed as being a lily white army, and that is not the case. There are enslaved people with these armies being brought. Kevin Levine has a book, addresses this in his book on Black Confederates, about camp servants, as they're called, attendants that are addressing, assisting Confederate officers. And this is an area of interest for the museum, is beginning to really make an active effort to look for and the experiences of enslaved people within the Confederate Army who had a medical role. And this is something the National Archives posted a great series of documents related to enslaved people in the Confederate government and Confederate Army. And there are a handful of documents there related to hospital and the service in hospitals of enslaved people. There's not a lot of, yep, it's amazing, this research. We are working on this. This is actually kind of a personal project of mine, going through some of the newspaper records from the Confederacy and trying to find these stories. We've been sharing some of them on the museum's page, Facebook and Instagram as well. So stay tuned for more information on that. It is a loaded topic, one that we could spend, again, probably another hour talking about. But a great comment to bring up that conversation. So we're just about out of time, Tim, coming up on an hour here. It feels like it's gone really fast. Always great. But I wanted to, before we get into our conclusion, I wanted to see if you had any final thoughts for our viewers.
I would just encourage people to dig into the USCT story a little bit more. If something that you've not examined much in your Civil War enthusiast life, there's a ton of new scholarship that's come out in the past 10, 12 years, giving a voice to these men who have previously not had much of a voice. There's some great works, like your host last week, Kelly Marszalek, her book on the 27th. There's some great regimental histories. There's some great overviews. I would encourage you to dig into these stories and make people aware of the African-American service to the United States during the war. An estimated 10% of the Union Army at the end of the war was African-American, and that really, in my opinion, swung the tide to the Union side with their participation. So they deserve credit, they deserve acknowledgement, they deserve recognition. find a place where you can get in there and learn about them and encourage other people to learn about them.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tim, for being here today. Really appreciate your expertise, and I'm also looking forward to talking to you a little bit later this year related to your work at Pamplin Park.
One last thing about that, we're planning a temporary exhibit on USCTs here at the park. That should be opening up hopefully toward the end of May. So be on the lookout for that on Facebook from Pamplin Historical Park. We'll be getting the word out on that, and we've got some really neat artifacts that most people haven't seen before. So be looking for that.
Excellent. Check out Pamplin Park. It is an amazing place. They also do a great job of sharing stories online. Their Facebook page is a trove of amazing stories. So go and follow them on Facebook. Highly recommend that. We'll drop that into the link, into the comments section here. All right. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. Still have about 78 of you all out there right now, which is awesome. Thank you all so much for being here today. If you did enjoy the video, you can help us by going and hitting that like button, hitting that thumbs up if you're over on YouTube, subscribing, following us. Sharing the video is also very helpful to bring more people into the conversation, this fascinating conversation that we've had today. You can also support these programs by becoming a member of the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. Your contributions will directly support programming like this and lots of great perks as well. You can find information about that in the comments section. Thank you to those of you who already have become members of the museum. We appreciate your support and allowing us to continue doing these programs, which we will do even once we start to reopen. We will continue doing these sorts of virtual conversations with scholars from across the United States, and as if you saw yesterday's presentation with Dr. Catherine Bateson, across the world. So this is these virtual platforms are great for that purpose. So thank you all so much. We will see you next week. We have some excellent programs coming up next week. You can find out more about that on our website and on our Facebook account. Hope you all have a great rest of your week and a great weekend. Thank you all so much, and hope you have a great day.